attention to this footage captured on a home security camera in the basement of a suburban residence. You're looking at a woman smiling brightly for the camera, positioned next to what appears to be a workout dummy or mannequin. But look closer at the figure beside her. Notice the discoloration on the skin, the unnatural positioning of the limbs, the way the clothing hangs loosely on the frame. This isn't a mannequin. This is a human body. And the woman taking this cheerful selfie? She's been living with this corpse for over a week, staging photos, posting to social media, and maintaining the illusion that everything in her life is absolutely perfect. What you're about to hear is the story of how one woman's obsession with online validation led to one of the most disturbing murder cases in recent memory. You know that feeling when you scroll through social media and everyone's life looks absolutely perfect? The filtered photos, the happy couple shots, the carefully curated existence that makes you wonder if your own life measures up? For Vanessa Hartley, that feeling wasn't just something she experienced, it was something she manufactured meticulously, obsessively, every single day. Vanessa was 32 years old and living in Cedar Falls, a picture-perfect suburb outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. To her 73,000 Instagram followers, she was living the dream. Fitness influencer, lifestyle guru, the woman who had it all together. Her feed was a highlight reel of morning smoothie bowls, sunset yoga sessions, and loving photos with her husband, Thomas Hartley. Thomas was 35, an investment analyst at a downtown firm, the kind of guy who wore pressed shirts and carried a leather briefcase. He wasn't naturally comfortable in front of cameras, but Vanessa had trained him well over their 4 years of marriage. Smile here, stand there, hold this smoothie, look at me like you adore me. Their neighbors on Maple Grove Drive knew them as the attractive young couple in the renovated Craftsman with the immaculate garden. Mrs. Chen next door would wave as Vanessa jogged past in matching athletic wear. The Johnsons across the street invited them to backyard barbecues, where Vanessa would inevitably pull out her phone for group photos that she'd later edit and post with captions about blessed friendships and community love. But here's the thing about perfect images. They're almost always hiding something. And in Vanessa's case, what she was hiding would shock an entire community and make headlines across the country. Because behind the filtered photos and inspirational captions, Vanessa Hartley was unraveling. Her marriage was falling apart. Her follower count had plateaued. Brands were dropping her for younger influencers. And Thomas wanted out. He wanted a divorce. He wanted his life back. Vanessa couldn't accept that. She'd built her entire identity, her entire online empire, around being the perfect wife with the perfect life. Losing Thomas meant losing everything. So on the evening of September 17, 2016, Vanessa made sure Thomas would never leave her. And then, in a decision that would horrify investigators, she decided to keep him around for the perfect photo opportunities. September had arrived with that particular kind of autumn crispness that makes Minnesota beautiful. The leaves were just starting to turn, and Vanessa had been planning her fall content calendar. Pumpkin spice recipes, cozy sweater photos, Thanksgiving prep with her loving husband. But Thomas had other plans. He came home from work on September 17th carrying more than his usual briefcase. He had a manila folder tucked under his arm, divorce papers that his attorney had drawn up that afternoon. He'd been seeing a therapist for 6 months, trying to process what his marriage had become, and Dr. Patricia Morrison had finally convinced him that he needed to leave. According to testimony that would later come from Thomas's colleague and best friend, Marcus Webb, Thomas had been confiding in him for over a year about the strain in his marriage. The constant photo shoots, the way Vanessa would erupt in rage if he didn't smile right or stand in the perfect spot. The hours she spent editing photos, obsessing over likes and comments, spiraling into depression when engagement dropped. "She's not the woman I married," Thomas had told Marcus over drinks just 3 days before his death. "Sometimes I think she cares more about the image of our marriage than the actual marriage itself." That evening of September 17th, Thomas walked through the front door around 6:30 p.m. Vanessa was in the kitchen, ring lights already set up, preparing to film a "What I Eat in a Day" video. She'd bought organic groceries that afternoon, spent an hour arranging them aesthetically on the counter, and had the perfect caption already written in her notes app. "We need to talk," Thomas said. Vanessa looked up from her camera setup, immediately irritated. "Can it wait? I'm losing the good light." "No, it can't wait." Thomas set down his briefcase and pulled out the manila folder. "I want a divorce, Vanessa." The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Vanessa stared at him, her face frozen in an expression that Thomas couldn't quite read. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You're joking." "I'm not joking. I can't do this anymore. Whatever this has become, it's not a marriage, it's a performance, and I'm done performing." Here's what happened next, based on forensic evidence and the scene reconstruction by the Cedar Falls Police Department. Vanessa didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Instead, she very calmly asked Thomas if he wanted dinner before they discussed it further. Thomas, probably relieved that she was taking it so well, agreed. Vanessa prepared chicken parmesan, Thomas's favorite. She opened a bottle of wine. She set the table. And while Thomas sat in the living room scrolling through his phone, probably texting Marcus about how the conversation had gone, Vanessa crushed up a significant amount of her prescription sleeping medication and stirred it into Thomas's wine glass. They sat down to eat at 7:15 p.m. Vanessa made small talk, asking about his day, smiling that practiced influencer smile. Thomas drank his wine, ate his dinner, and somewhere around 7:45 p.m. started feeling dizzy. By 8 p.m., he was unconscious on the living room couch. Vanessa sat and watched him sleep for almost an hour. Later, forensic psychologist Dr. Raymond Foster would testify that this was likely when Vanessa made her decision. She could have called 911. Thomas would have been fine. The dose wasn't lethal, just incapacitating. But sitting there in her carefully decorated living room, looking at her husband who wanted to leave her, who wanted to destroy the image she'd built, Vanessa chose murder. She went down to the basement where Thomas kept his tools. She selected a claw hammer, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind you'd use to hang pictures. She came back upstairs, and at approximately 9:20 p.m., she struck Thomas Hartley repeatedly in the head until he stopped breathing. The forensic report would later indicate at least 7 blows to the skull, causing massive cranial fractures and brain trauma. Death would have been relatively quick, occurring within minutes of the attack. Thomas never regained consciousness. He never fought back. He simply died on the couch where he'd fallen asleep, believing his wife was making him dinner while they worked through their problems. After it was done, Vanessa sat on the floor next to her husband's body and cried. Not because she regretted killing him, that would become clear later, but because her perfect life was over. The Instagram empire she'd built was crumbling. Everything she'd worked for was destroyed. But then something shifted in her mind. A thought crystallized that would lead to one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in Minnesota history. Why did it have to be over? Why couldn't she just keep going, keep posting, keep up the illusion? Thomas was dead, but he could still be the perfect husband. He wouldn't complain about photo shoots anymore, wouldn't talk about divorce, wouldn't ruin everything. Around 11 p.m. that night, Vanessa cleaned up the blood. She was methodical about it, using bleach and towels, working for over 2 hours to remove every visible trace from the couch and carpet. She moved Thomas's body to the basement, dragging him down the stairs and positioning him in the corner near her home gym equipment. Then she went upstairs, washed her face, fixed her hair, and opened Instagram. At 11:47 p.m., she posted a photo of herself in workout clothes with the caption, "Evening training session complete. Remember, consistency is key. Thomas just finished his workout too. We're both committed to our fitness journey together. Hashtag couple goals, hashtag fitness motivation, hashtag consistency is key." The photo showed Vanessa smiling brightly, supposedly post-workout. What her 73,000 followers didn't know was that her husband's body was in the basement just a few feet outside the camera frame, and the workout she'd completed was murder. Over the next 10 days, Vanessa would post 23 times to Instagram and 14 times to her Instagram stories. She'd share smoothie recipes, fitness tips, and inspirational quotes. She'd respond to comments with emojis and enthusiastic replies, and every single day she'd go down to the basement and take photos with Thomas's decomposing corpse. September 18th, September 19th, September 20th. Day after day, Vanessa maintained her online presence, her follower count actually increasing by 400 during this period. Brands reached out about partnerships. Followers commented about how inspiring she was, how perfect her life seemed. But in the real world, Thomas wasn't showing up at work. His phone went straight to voicemail, his emails went unanswered, and his colleagues were starting to worry. Marcus Webb called Thomas's phone 17 times over the first 5 days. He sent text messages. Nothing. On September 22nd, Marcus called Vanessa directly. "Hey Vanessa, it's Marcus. I can't reach Tom. Is everything okay?" Vanessa's voice was bright, cheerful, exactly the tone of her Instagram captions. "Oh, Marcus, yes, everything's fine. Thomas is actually taking some personal time. He needed a break from work. You know how stressful it's been. We decided to do a digital detox together. No phones, no computers, just quality time." Marcus thought it was odd. Thomas hadn't mentioned anything about time off, and a digital detox seemed out of character for someone who lived on his phone for work. But Vanessa sounded so normal, so unconcerned, that Marcus let it go for a few more days. Thomas's boss, Jennifer Richardson, was less understanding. On September 26th, when Thomas missed an important client presentation that had been scheduled for months, she called Vanessa herself. "Mrs. Hartley, Thomas hasn't been to work in over a week, and we haven't heard from him at all. This isn't like him. We're concerned." Vanessa maintained her story about the digital detox, adding a new detail. They were considering a trip out of state, maybe a spontaneous vacation. Jennifer, while frustrated about the work situation, had no reason to suspect anything sinister. People did quit jobs. People did have nervous breakdowns and disappear for a while. It happened. But Marcus Webb couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Thomas wouldn't just vanish without telling him. They'd been friends since college. They talked almost every day. And that last conversation, about the divorce, about wanting out, it played on Marcus's mind. On September 27th, 10 days after Thomas's murder, Marcus drove to the Hartley residence on Maple Grove Drive. It was 6:30 p.m., the sun setting in that golden autumn way that makes everything look peaceful and normal. He rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. She was dressed in yoga pants and an athletic tank top, her hair in a high ponytail. She looked tired, but still camera-ready. "Marcus, what a surprise. I'm sorry to just show up, but I really need to talk to Tom. Can I see him?" Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "He's actually not here right now. He went for a run." "A run? I thought you guys were doing a digital detox and staying home?" A flicker of something, irritation, panic, crossed Vanessa's face, but she recovered quickly. "Well, yes, but he still goes out. He just doesn't take his phone. Very committed to the detox. Can I wait for him? I really need to talk to him about something important." "Actually, this isn't a great time. I was just about to film some content. Maybe you could come back tomorrow?" Marcus looked past Vanessa into the house. Everything looked normal, clean, organized. The same tastefully decorated home he'd visited dozens of times for dinner parties and game nights. But something felt off. He couldn't put his finger on it, but every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. "Vanessa, is Tom okay? Really?" Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. "Of course he's okay. Why wouldn't he be? He talked to me about some issues in the marriage before he disappeared." "He didn't disappear, Marcus. He's taking a break. We're working through things. It's really none of your business." Marcus left, but he wasn't satisfied. That night, he called Thomas's parents, who lived in Ohio. Robert and Linda Hartley hadn't heard from their son in 2 weeks either, which wasn't entirely unusual. Thomas wasn't the best at calling home regularly, but combined with everything else, it set off alarms. "We tried calling him, but Vanessa said they're doing some technology break," Linda told Marcus. "I thought it was odd, but she seemed fine. Is something wrong?" Marcus made a decision. Early the next morning, September 28th, he drove to the Cedar Falls Police Department and filed a missing person report. Detective Sarah Chen was assigned to the case on the morning of September 28th. She was 38 years old, a 12-year veteran of the Cedar Falls PD, and she'd worked her share of missing person cases. Most of them resolved within 72 hours. People turned up, having gone on unexpected trips or staying with friends after arguments. But something about Marcus Webb's report caught her attention. He was planning to divorce his wife, Marcus explained, sitting across from Detective Chen in the interview room. He told me 3 days before he vanished. He was going to tell her that night, September 17th. Then he just disappeared. No calls, no texts, no showing up at work. It's been 11 days. Detective Chen made notes, asking standard questions. Had Thomas ever disappeared before? No. Did he have a history of mental health issues? Not that Marcus knew of. Any financial problems, drug use, extramarital affairs? No, no, and no. What about the wife? How did she seem when you talked to her? Marcus hesitated. Normal. Maybe too normal. Like, her husband's been missing for over a week and she was acting like everything was fine. She said they were doing a digital detox, but Tom was a workaholic. I can't see him just ditching work without telling anyone. Detective Chen decided to pay Vanessa Hartley a visit. She drove to Maple Grove Drive that afternoon with her partner, Detective Miguel Rodriguez. The house was exactly the kind of place you'd expect a successful young couple to live. Well-maintained, beautiful landscaping, a BMW, and a Tesla in the driveway. Vanessa answered the door wearing the same type of athletic wear she always wore, and she seemed genuinely surprised to see police officers. "Can I help you?" Detective Chen introduced herself and explained that Thomas had been reported missing. Vanessa's expression shifted from surprise to what looked like genuine concern. Missing? He's not missing. Who reported him missing? A concerned friend and coworker. We're required to follow up on these reports, Mrs. Hartley. When was the last time you saw your husband? Vanessa invited them inside. The house was immaculate, the kind of clean that comes from either having a professional cleaner or spending a lot of time maintaining appearances. Fresh flowers on the console table. Throw pillows arranged just so. Everything picture perfect. Thomas left me, Vanessa said, her voice breaking slightly. On September 17th. We had an argument, and he said he wanted space. He packed a bag and left. I've been trying to give him time to cool off, but honestly, I've been worried too. He packed a bag? Detective Rodriguez asked. Yes, clothes, toiletries. He said he was going to stay at a hotel for a while that we'd talk when he was ready. Did he say which hotel? No, he wouldn't tell me. He was angry. And you haven't heard from him since? Vanessa shook her head, pulling out her phone. I've sent him so many texts. Look. She showed them her phone, a string of messages to Thomas. Miss you. Please come home. We can work this out. All undelivered, all marked as unread. Detective Chen asked to see Thomas's belongings, his laptop, his other clothes, anything he'd left behind. Vanessa led them upstairs to the bedroom. Thomas's side of the closet still had clothes hanging in it. His laptop was on the desk. His toiletries were in the bathroom. I thought you said he packed a bag, Rodriguez asked. He did, some clothes. Not everything. Where's his phone charger? Vanessa looked around. I don't know. Maybe he took it. The detective spent an hour searching the house, with Vanessa's permission, looking for signs of foul play or struggle. Everything was clean. Too clean, actually. Detective Chen noticed that the living room couch looked brand new, the fabric stiff like it had recently been cleaned or replaced. The carpet appeared freshly shampooed. You recently have the house cleaned? Chen asked. I clean regularly. I like things neat. They asked about the basement. Vanessa led them down, seeming completely calm. The basement was finished. A home gym on one side, storage on the other. Exercise equipment, yoga mats, resistance bands, some cardboard boxes in the corner, a dehumidifier running. Detective Rodriguez noticed the strong smell of cleaning products, and something underneath it, something organic and unpleasant that the cleaning products weren't quite masking. What's that smell? He asked. Probably the dehumidifier. Sometimes it gets a weird smell when it needs cleaning. I've been meaning to deal with it. The detectives didn't see anything obviously suspicious, but both of them had that same instinct Marcus had. Something was off. The wife was too calm. The house was too clean. The story about Thomas packing a bag and leaving didn't quite match with his belongings still being in the house. Mrs. Hartley, would you be willing to come down to the station and give a formal statement? Detective Chen asked. Of course. Anything to help find Thomas. That evening, Vanessa sat in the interview room at Cedar Falls PD and gave a detailed account of the last time she saw her husband. She was cooperative, even emotional, crying at several points as she described their argument and his decision to leave. I love my husband, she said, tears streaming down her face. I just want him to come home safe. While Vanessa was being interviewed, Detective Chen ran her social media. She pulled up Vanessa's Instagram account and started scrolling, post after post of seemingly happy content. Workout videos, food photos, and several posts mentioning Thomas or showing them together. But here's what caught Chen's attention. On September 18th, the day after Thomas allegedly left, Vanessa had posted a photo of herself holding a smoothie with the caption, Thomas and I are trying this new green smoothie recipe. He's still skeptical, but I'm converting him slowly. On September 21st. Date night prep. Thomas is taking me somewhere special tonight. He won't tell me where. #LuckyWife. On September 24th. Lazy Sunday with my favorite person. Thomas and I are just relaxing at home, and it's exactly what we needed. Detective Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Either Vanessa was lying about Thomas leaving, or she was posting fake content to maintain appearances. Both options were concerning. She showed the post to Detective Rodriguez. Look at these timestamps. She's saying Thomas left on the 17th, but she's posting like they're still together, like he's still here. Could she be in denial? Posting old content? Maybe. Or maybe she's lying about something. They needed more. A missing person case without evidence of foul play wasn't enough to get a search warrant. They needed probable cause. Chen decided to dig deeper. Over the next 2 days, detectives interviewed Thomas's co-workers, his boss, his parents, and several of the Hartley's neighbors. Everyone painted the same picture. Thomas was reliable, steady, not the type to vanish without explanation. And his marriage had been strained, with Vanessa's obsession with social media being a constant source of tension. Jennifer Richardson, Thomas's boss, provided records showing that Thomas hadn't accessed any of his work accounts since September 17th. His company credit card hadn't been used. His laptop showed no activity. His work phone was pinging from the last location it was on, near the Hartley residence, and had been off since the evening of September 17th. Then they got a break. Detective Rodriguez pulled security footage from the bank ATM closest to the Hartley house, hoping to catch Thomas making a withdrawal. What he found instead was even more interesting. On September 19th at 2:47 p.m., Vanessa Hartley was captured on ATM camera withdrawing $400 from Thomas's personal account. She used his debit card, which meant she had access to his wallet. If Thomas had left the house with a packed bag to stay at a hotel, why did he leave his wallet behind? Chen and Rodriguez brought Vanessa back in for another interview on October 1st. Mrs. Hartley, we have some questions about your husband's finances. Okay? You withdrew money from his account on September 19th, $400. Vanessa didn't hesitate. Yes, he asked me to. He called and said he needed cash. He called? Yes. From what number? You said you hadn't heard from him. A pause. Vanessa's expression flickered. From a friend's phone. He said his phone died. And he asked you to withdraw cash from his account rather than coming to get his wallet himself. Yes, he was embarrassed. He didn't want to see me yet. Where did you take the money? I left it in an envelope in the mailbox. He picked it up later that day. Did anyone see him pick it up? I don't know. I wasn't watching. The story was possible, but every instinct told Detective Chen that Vanessa was lying. The problem was proving it. They needed something concrete, evidence of a crime, proof that Thomas hadn't left voluntarily. Chen decided to get a warrant for Thomas's phone records and financial accounts. What they found raised even more red flags. Thomas's phone had been turned off at 9:43 p.m. on September 17th and never turned back on. His last text message was to Marcus Webb at 6:17 p.m., telling her tonight, "Wish me luck." His credit cards hadn't been used. His bank account hadn't been accessed except for Vanessa's withdrawal. It was like Thomas Hartley had simply ceased to exist at approximately 9:43 p.m. on September 17th. On October 3rd, 16 days after Thomas's disappearance, Detective Chen applied for a search warrant for the Hartley residence. She presented the judge with the evidence: inconsistent statements from Vanessa, social media posts that contradicted her claim that Thomas had left, no financial or digital activity from Thomas in over 2 weeks, and the suspicious ATM withdrawal. The warrant was approved. On the morning of October 4th at 6 a.m., Detective Chen, Detective Rodriguez, and 6 other officers from the Cedar Falls PD arrived at the Hartley home with the search warrant. Vanessa answered the door in pajamas, looking exhausted, probably the first time anyone had seen her without makeup and carefully styled hair. "We have a warrant to search your home, Mrs. Hartley." Vanessa's face went pale. "Why? What are you looking for?" "Evidence related to your husband's disappearance." They started with the main floor, then moved to the upstairs. Forensic techs used luminol to check for blood traces. In the living room, the couch and carpet lit up like the 4th of July, massive amounts of blood residue that had been cleaned but not eliminated. Someone had bled significantly in that room. "Mrs. Hartley, can you explain the blood in your living room?" Vanessa's hands were shaking. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Luminol shows blood traces on your couch and carpet, a lot of blood. Maybe Thomas cut himself before he left, or it could be from months ago. I don't remember." They moved to the basement. The smell that Rodriguez had noticed before was stronger now, unmistakable to anyone who'd ever smelled decomposition. The tech started in the gym area, then moved to the storage section. Behind a row of cardboard boxes, in the far corner of the basement, they found him. Thomas Hartley was sitting propped against the wall, his body in advanced stages of decomposition. He was dressed in the same work clothes he'd worn on September 17th, pressed shirt, slacks, his wedding ring still on his finger. The head trauma was immediately visible, even in the state the body was in. Massive fractures to the skull, dried blood matting his hair. But what made every officer in that basement feel sick was the setup around the body. Ring lights were positioned on either side. A portable camera tripod stood nearby, and scattered around the corpse were props, a yoga mat, some weights, a water bottle, like someone had been staging photo shoots. Detective Chen turned to look at Vanessa, who had followed them down to the basement. The woman's face was completely blank, emotionless, as she stared at her husband's decomposing corpse. "Vanessa Hartley, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Hartley." Vanessa didn't respond. She just kept staring at Thomas's body, and after a long moment she whispered, "He was supposed to be perfect now. He was supposed to stop complaining." The investigation that followed Vanessa's arrest became one of the most bizarre cases the Cedar Falls Police Department had ever handled, because what they discovered on Vanessa's phone and computer revealed a level of detachment from reality that stunned even seasoned detectives. Forensic digital analyst Kevin Park was assigned to examine all of Vanessa's devices, her phone, laptop, and camera equipment. What he found would become crucial evidence in the prosecution's case. First, the photographs. Vanessa had taken over 200 photos with Thomas's corpse over the 10-day period between his murder and the police search. The images were time-stamped and geotagged, providing an exact timeline of her activities. September 18th, 7:23 a.m. Vanessa photographed herself in the basement with Thomas's body positioned to look like he was spotting her while she did squats. The caption she'd written but not posted: "Workout buddies for life. Thomas always has my back." September 19th, 2:15 p.m. She'd moved the body to the home gym area and photographed it sitting on a weight bench while she posed doing bicep curls. The decomposition was already visible in the photo, but Vanessa had used filters and editing to try to minimize it. September 21st, 6:30 p.m. The body was positioned near the basement stairs with Vanessa next to it, both of them holding protein shakes. The caption, "Evening protein after a great couple's workout. #fitness couple. #motivation." September 23rd, 9:45 a.m. Vanessa had dressed Thomas's body in different clothes, a casual t-shirt and jeans, and photographed him from behind as if he was looking out the basement window. She posted this to her Instagram story with text overlay, "Thomas enjoying the view while I prep breakfast." The photos became increasingly disturbing as decomposition progressed. By September 26th, Thomas's skin was visibly discolored, his features distorted by swelling and decay. But Vanessa kept photographing him, kept staging scenes, kept trying to maintain the illusion of her perfect marriage. What was most chilling was that she'd posted some of these photos publicly. Not the ones that clearly showed Thomas's body, but cropped versions. Her smiling face, carefully framed to show just enough of the background to suggest Thomas was nearby. The comments on these posts were full of followers gushing about relationship goals and asking where Thomas got his workout equipment. Kevin Park also discovered Vanessa's search history from the days following the murder. On September 18th at 3:12 a.m. she'd searched "How long before a body smells" and "How to preserve a body at home." On September 20th, decomposition timeline and embalming techniques. On September 23rd, can police track deleted photos and how to permanently delete data. The prosecution would later argue that these searches showed premeditation and consciousness of guilt. Vanessa knew what she'd done was wrong, but she was more concerned with managing the practical problems of living with a corpse than with the moral implications of murder. Detective Chen interviewed Vanessa 3 times after her arrest. The woman's affect was flat, almost robotic, as she described what had happened. She showed no remorse for killing Thomas, only frustration that her plan hadn't worked. "I couldn't let him leave me," Vanessa explained in the second interview, her voice calm and measured. "Don't you understand? My entire brand was built around being the perfect wife. The woman who had it all, the career, the marriage, the lifestyle. If Thomas divorced me, I'd lose everything. The followers, the sponsorships, the respect. People don't follow divorced influencers, they follow happy couples." "So you killed him?" Detective Chen asked. "I didn't plan to, but after I drugged him, after he was unconscious on the couch, I realized this was my opportunity. He'd been so difficult, so resistant to being part of my content, always complaining about the photos, about having to smile for the camera, about how much time I spent on social media. But if he was dead, he couldn't complain anymore. He could be exactly what I needed him to be." "And the photos? Why did you keep taking photos with his body?" Vanessa looked at Detective Chen like the question was stupid. "Because my followers expected content. I couldn't just stop posting. People would ask questions. The algorithm would drop me. I had to maintain consistency." "You understand that your husband was dead, right? That you were photographing a corpse?" "Of course I understand. But he looked fine in the photos. With the right angles and filters, he looked completely normal. Nobody could tell." Forensic psychologist Dr. Raymond Foster evaluated Vanessa for competency to stand trial. His report, which would be presented in court, diagnosed her with severe narcissistic personality disorder with psychotic features and depersonalization disorder. In layman's terms, Vanessa's sense of identity was so wrapped up in her online persona that she'd lost touch with reality. She genuinely seemed to believe that maintaining her Instagram image was more important than her husband's life. She displays a profound lack of empathy and an inability to distinguish between her curated online identity and her actual self, Dr. Foster wrote in his report. The murder and subsequent behavior represent a complete breakdown in her ability to recognize the humanity of others, including her own husband. To her, Thomas was ultimately just another prop in the narrative she was constructing for her audience. The physical evidence was overwhelming. The medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, determined that Thomas had been struck at least 7 times with a claw hammer that was recovered from the Hartley basement. His blood was on the hammer handle, and forensic testing confirmed it was the murder weapon. The toxicology report showed massive amounts of zolpidem, the active ingredient in Ambien, in Thomas's system, consistent with Vanessa's prescription that had been filled 2 days before the murder and was now empty. The prosecution built a timeline that was impossible to dispute. Thomas had been murdered on September 17th between 8 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. Vanessa had cleaned up the crime scene, moved the body to the basement, and then spent the next 10 days living her life as if nothing had happened, posting to social media, responding to comments, staging photo shoots with her husband's decomposing corpse. But there was one piece of evidence that tied everything together perfectly: the smoking gun that proved Vanessa's guilt beyond any doubt, the security camera footage. Here's what investigators discovered when they analyzed the digital files from Vanessa's own home security system. The Hartleys had installed cameras throughout their house for safety. One in the living room, one at the front door, one in the basement near the home gym. Vanessa had thought she'd deleted the footage from September 17th. She'd manually gone into the system on September 19th and erased the files from the cloud storage and the local hard drive. But what she didn't know was that the security company maintained backup archives for 30 days as part of their standard service. Detective Chen obtained a warrant for these archives on October 5th, and when the security company provided the files, they captured everything. The living room camera showed Thomas arriving home at 6:31 p.m. on September 17th. It showed the conversation at 6:45 p.m. where he presented the divorce papers. It captured Vanessa going to the kitchen at 7:04 p.m. and the dinner being served at 7:15 p.m. Then, crucially, it showed Thomas becoming increasingly drowsy around 7:48 p.m., stumbling to the couch at 7:55 p.m., and losing consciousness by 8:03 p.m. The camera captured Vanessa sitting and watching him for 53 minutes. Just sitting, watching, thinking. At 8:56 p.m., she stood up and walked out of frame. At 9:02 p.m., she returned carrying the hammer. And at 9:07 p.m., she struck her husband repeatedly in the head while he slept, killing him on camera in horrifying detail. The basement camera captured the rest. It showed Vanessa dragging Thomas's body down the stairs at 11:26 p.m. It showed her positioning him in the corner. It showed her setting up ring lights at 11:47 p.m. and taking that first photograph, the smiling selfie she'd posted to Instagram at 11:49 p.m. And over the next 10 days, the basement camera captured every single photo session. Vanessa moving the body, changing its clothes, positioning it in different poses, smiling for the camera while her husband rotted a few feet away. The footage that would become the centerpiece of the trial, the one played in court that made several jurors visibly ill, was from September 25th. It showed Vanessa talking to Thomas's corpse as she posed it for photos. "Smile, baby. Come on, you need to smile. Remember, consistency is key. That's our brand. Happy couple, fitness goals, perfect life. See? That's better. Now you're the perfect husband. Exactly what I always wanted." The basement security footage also revealed something else that became crucial to understanding Vanessa's psychology. On September 22nd, 5 days after the murder, the camera captured Vanessa having a complete breakdown in the basement. She sat on the floor next to Thomas's body and sobbed for over an hour, talking to him as if he could hear her. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I didn't want to do this, but you were going to leave me. You were going to destroy everything I built. Don't you understand? Without you, I'm nothing. My followers, my sponsors, my entire life, it all depends on us being the perfect couple. I couldn't let you take that away from me." Then, after the tears stopped, she stood up, wiped her face, adjusted her hair, and took another smiling photo with his corpse. This footage would be used by both the prosecution and defense, the prosecution to show consciousness of guilt, the defense to demonstrate mental instability. But either way, it painted a picture of a woman who understood what she'd done, but couldn't reconcile it with her need to maintain her online image. Forensic analysts also discovered that Vanessa had been researching crime scene cleanup and body disposal methods, but had ultimately decided against moving Thomas from the house. According to her interview transcripts, she feared that disposing of the body would mean losing her ability to stage couple photos, which would eventually raise questions from her followers about why Thomas never appeared in her content anymore. "I thought about it," she told Detective Chen. "I looked up how to, get rid of a body. But then what? People would ask where Thomas was. I'd have to explain why he was never in photos anymore. At least if he was in the basement, I could keep taking pictures with him. I could keep up the illusion for a while longer." "But the body was decomposing," Chen said. "You had to know that wouldn't work forever." "I was going to figure it out. Maybe say he was traveling for work, or that he was sick and didn't want to be photographed. I just needed time to build up my following more, to get more sponsorships locked in, so that when I finally had to admit he was gone, I'd have enough of a platform that people would stay interested in me even as a single woman." The level of calculation was staggering. Even as Thomas's body decayed in her basement, Vanessa was planning her next career move, thinking about how to leverage his disappearance for maximum engagement. The trial of Vanessa Hartley began on March 14, 2017, exactly 6 months after her arrest. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, presented a case that was as straightforward as it was disturbing. The evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the digital photographs, the search history, the forensic evidence from the living room and basement, the murder weapon with Vanessa's fingerprints and Thomas's blood, the testimony from multiple witnesses about the state of the Hartleys' marriage, and Vanessa's obsession with social media. The defense, led by attorney Patricia Monroe, attempted to argue that Vanessa was insane at the time of the murder, that her mental illness had robbed her of the ability to understand what she was doing or to distinguish right from wrong. They called Dr. Raymond Foster to testify about her narcissistic personality disorder and her detachment from reality, but the prosecution countered with the evidence of premeditation, the crushed sleeping pills, the cleanup of the crime scene, the deliberate deletion of security footage, the calculated deception in her statements to police and Thomas's colleagues. These weren't the actions of someone who didn't understand what they'd done. These were the actions of someone trying desperately to cover up a crime. A DA Torres's closing argument was devastating. He played clips from the security footage, showed the photographs Vanessa had taken, and read excerpts from her social media posts during the 10 days she'd lived with Thomas's corpse. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you've seen and heard in this trial is not the story of someone who lost touch with reality in a moment of passion. This is the story of a woman who valued her online image more than her husband's life, who killed him not because she was afraid of him, not because she was in danger, but because he threatened the illusion she'd created. And then, in perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case, she used his dead body as a prop to maintain that illusion. Vanessa Hartley knew exactly what she was doing. She planned it, she executed it, she tried to cover it up, and when she was caught, she showed no remorse, because to her, Thomas Hartley wasn't a person. He was content, and even in death, she tried to exploit him for likes and follows. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On March 28, 2017, they returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Chen, sentenced Vanessa to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, Thomas's parents, Robert and Linda Hartley, gave victim impact statements that brought the entire courtroom to tears. "Our son was a good man," Robert said, his voice breaking. "He was kind, generous, hardworking. He deserved a partner who loved him for who he was, not for what he could do for her image. He deserved to grow old, to have children, to live the life he'd planned. Instead, he was murdered by the woman he trusted most in the world, and his body was desecrated in a way that defies comprehension." We'll never understand how Vanessa could do what she did, how she could live with his body for 10 days, taking pictures, posting to social media, pretending everything was fine. Our son deserved so much better than this. Linda Hartley addressed Vanessa directly. "You stole our son from us. You took away his future, his dreams, his very humanity. And for what? For followers? For likes? For an image? I hope you spend every day in prison thinking about what you've done. And I hope you eventually realize that those followers, those likes, that perfect image you killed for, none of it was real. But Thomas was real, and he's gone forever because of you." Vanessa showed no emotion during the sentencing. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her face as blank as it had been the day police found Thomas's body. In the months following the trial, the case sparked conversations about social media addiction, the pressure to maintain perfect online images, and the dangers of valuing virtual validation over real human connection. Mental health professionals wrote articles analyzing what had gone wrong in Vanessa's mind, how someone could become so detached from reality that murder seemed like a reasonable solution to a relationship problem. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a clinical psychologist who specializes in social media addiction, wrote an op-ed for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune examining the Hartley case. "What we saw with Vanessa Hartley is an extreme example of a phenomenon we're increasingly observing in our digitally connected world," Walsh wrote. "When someone's entire sense of self-worth becomes tied to external validation, likes, comments, follower counts, they can lose sight of what actually matters: real relationships, real connection, real life." Vanessa's tragedy is that she confused her online persona with her actual identity, and when that persona was threatened, she was willing to destroy everything to protect it. Thomas's workplace, Millennial Financial Group, established a scholarship fund in his name for young financial analysts pursuing careers in investment management. The Thomas Hartley Memorial Scholarship awards $10,000 annually to a deserving student who demonstrates both professional excellence and personal integrity, qualities that Thomas embodied throughout his life. His parents became advocates for mental health awareness, particularly around social media addiction and narcissistic personality disorder. They partnered with the National Alliance on Mental Illness to create educational programs about recognizing warning signs of obsessive social media use and the importance of maintaining authentic relationships in an increasingly digital world. Robert and Linda also worked to push for legislation requiring social media platforms to include more prominent mental health resources and warnings about the psychological dangers of comparison culture and validation-seeking behavior. While their efforts gained attention, meaningful legislative changes have been slow to materialize. Marcus Webb, who'd been the one to file the missing person report that eventually led to the investigation, struggled with guilt for months after the trial. He questioned whether he should have acted sooner, whether Thomas would still be alive if he'd pushed harder when his instincts first told him something was wrong. "I knew Tom was in trouble," Marcus said in an interview 6 months after the trial. "Some part of me knew, but Vanessa was so convincing, so normal-seeming. I let her explanations satisfy me when I should have trusted my instincts. I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I also want people to know, if someone you care about goes missing, if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Act quickly, because in Tom's case, those 10 days made all the difference." The house on Maple Grove Drive was sold in June 2017. The new owners, a family relocating from California, bought it at a significant discount due to its history. They completely renovated it, removing all traces of the Hartleys and the horror that had occurred there. The basement was entirely remodeled. New flooring, new walls, new lighting. They turned it into a bright family room where their children play video games and host sleepovers. But the neighbors remember. They remember the police cars, the news vans, the yellow crime scene tape that cordoned off the house for days. They remember learning that murder had been happening in their quiet suburban neighborhood while they waved hello and chatted about weather and local news at their mailboxes. Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who used to wave at Vanessa during her morning runs, gave an interview to a local news station. "You think you know people. You see them every day, you chat about the weather and local news and you think everything's normal, but you never really know what's happening behind closed doors. I'll never look at social media the same way again. All those perfect pictures, perfect lives. Now I wonder what's really going on behind the camera. Vanessa fooled all of us. She had us all believing her life was perfect while her husband's body was decomposing in her basement." The psychological impact on the community was significant. Cedar Falls, a suburb that had always prided itself on being safe and family-friendly, was forced to confront the reality that evil could exist even in the most seemingly perfect environments. Parents became more vigilant about their children's social media use. Neighbors became more watchful, more willing to report concerns to police, rather than assuming everything was fine. The Cedar Falls PD used the case as a training example for new officers about the importance of trusting instincts and thoroughly investigating cases even when everything appears normal on the surface. Detective Sarah Chen, who led the investigation, received a commendation for her work on the case and has since been promoted to sergeant. The Hartley case taught me that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most normal, Chen reflected in a department interview. Vanessa wasn't a career criminal. She didn't have a history of violence. To everyone who knew her, she was a successful fitness influencer living the dream life. But underneath that carefully curated image was someone capable of horrific violence. It's a reminder to never take things at face value. Vanessa Hartley is currently serving her sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility in Shakopee, Minnesota. According to reports from corrections officers, she spends most of her time alone, withdrawn from other inmates. She's been denied access to social media, which prison psychologists note has been difficult for her to process. Her identity was so thoroughly constructed around her online presence that being cut off from it has left her struggling to know who she is. In a rare interview conducted by prison officials as part of her ongoing psychological evaluation, Vanessa spoke about her life before and after the murder. "I don't know who I am without Instagram," she said. "For years, that's how I defined myself, by how many followers I had, how much engagement my posts got, what brands wanted to work with me. When they took that away, when I came to prison, it was like I just disappeared. I'm nobody now. Just another inmate with a number." When asked about Thomas and what she'd done to him, Vanessa's response was chilling in its lack of empathy. "I know I'm supposed to feel bad. The therapists here keep telling me I should feel remorse, but mostly I just feel empty. Thomas was my husband, but in a way, he was also my business partner, my brand. When he wanted to leave, he was essentially destroying my livelihood. I reacted to protect what I'd built. I understand now that was wrong, but I still can't really feel it, if that makes sense." It doesn't make sense to most people, but to forensic psychologists who study narcissistic personality disorder, Vanessa's responses are textbook examples of someone who lacks the capacity for genuine empathy and remorse. Thomas's Instagram account, maintained by his parents as a memorial, has more followers now than when he was alive, currently sitting at over 150,000. People leave comments remembering him, expressing sympathy for his family, and condemning what happened to him. It's a strange kind of irony. In death, Thomas became part of the very social media world he'd grown to hate. His parents post occasionally, sharing memories of Thomas's life, photos from his childhood, and updates about the scholarship fund and advocacy work they do in his name. They've used the platform to reach young people about the dangers of social media addiction and the importance of valuing authentic relationships over curated images. "Thomas would probably laugh at the irony," Linda posted on the first anniversary of his death. "He hated social media. He thought it was fake, that it was ruining real human connection. And now we're using it to honor his memory and try to prevent other families from experiencing what we've gone through. But if it helps even one person recognize the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship with social media, if it saves even one life, then maybe there's some purpose in this tragedy." Vanessa Hartley was convicted of first-degree murder, premeditated, abuse of a corpse, obstruction of justice, making false statements to law enforcement. She received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder charge, with additional consecutive sentences for the other charges totaling 15 years. Thomas Hartley was 35 years old when he died. He'd wanted to be a father someday. He'd talked about retiring early and traveling. He'd dreamed of a quieter life, away from cameras and carefully curated images. He wanted authenticity in a world that increasingly valued performance over truth. Instead, his life was cut short by someone who couldn't see past their own reflection in a phone screen. someone who valued likes more than love, followers more than family, and image more than the actual human being standing in front of her. This case stands as a stark reminder that behind every perfect post, every filtered photo, every carefully crafted online image, there are real people with real struggles, and sometimes the pressure to maintain that perfection can lead to unthinkable tragedy, but it also reminds us of the importance of community, of people like Marcus Webb who trusted their instincts and refused to accept convenient explanations when they knew something was wrong. Of detectives like Sarah Chen who looked beyond the surface and followed the evidence wherever it led. Of parents like Robert and Linda who turned their grief into advocacy and purpose. Thomas Hartley deserved better than to become content. He deserved to be seen, truly seen, as a human being with hopes and fears and dreams. He deserved a partner who valued him for who he was, not for what he could do for her brand. He deserved to live the life he'd planned, to grow old, to have children, to find happiness on his own terms. May his memory be a reminder to all of us to value real connection over virtual validation, to see the people in our lives as more than supporting characters in our personal narratives, and to remember that no amount of likes or follows is worth sacrificing our humanity. Rest in peace, Thomas Hartley. You were more than a prop. You were a son, a friend, a colleague, a human being who mattered, and you will always be remembered.